Hi, my name is Koku with blackfilm.com, and I have the honor of interviewing Shaka King, director, producer, and writer of Judas and the Black Messiah. Thank you so much for speaking with me.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So what drew you to Fred Hampton's story, and particularly the angle of William O'Neill and his betrayal through the FBI?
Well, it came to me that way. The idea came to me from the Lucas brothers, who said to me, we want to make a movie about Fred Hampton and William O'Neill that we envision is The Departed set inside the world of COINTELPRO, which is Edgar J. Hoover's counterintelligence program that was designed in the 60s to crush anyone he deemed dissident. And so I recognized instantly in that pitch, that was just a brilliant method of bringing forth these radical ideas and these important ideas in Fred Hampton's genius words to the masses. And I also recognized that understanding, the industry and the way it works, that it was the only way that you would get that information forth. I think, period, quite frankly, because, when you start looking at telling that story and doing it justice of any kind, there's a certain scale and scope to the film that has to exist. It's a period film. It's a period film and a lot happens. And so you have to make it within the studio system in order to make a movie about that. And so that was the, sort of business reason to make it, because it was the only way it could exist within the industry. The political reason that we came to later, because when you think of that, you say, okay, but then you're like, okay, well, then how is this useful? What is the utility? Like,
Right.
How is this something that his family could even potentially get behind, and B, does something useful for the Panthers legacy. And so it was like, well, you have an opportunity, right, to really look at, if you want to elevate who Fred Hampton was, you probably want to contrast him to who he wasn't, and so you have an opportunity to, a lot of people don't even understand what capitalism and socialism are. And you can introduce these concepts via his speeches, which we do. The first words you hear him say are, we're not going to fight racism with racism. We're not going to fight, capitalism with black capitalism. We're going to fight it with socialism. And, I think there are other speeches in the movie, the following speech where he talks about, there's a man in our community called a capitalist. Black, white, brown, red don't matter. That stuff's in there in the words, but I thought it was equally powerful and equally important to show those words within a cultural framework, within a mode of behavior, so you're looking at Fred Hampton build coalitions along class interests, the first half of the movie is just him trying to get people to commit to this cause because they're all facing the same oppressor, whether it's the Crowns, whether it's the Young Patriots, whether it's the Young Lords. And then in William O'Neill, you have an individualist. You have someone who, and this is not an indictment, this particular thing I'm not going to say is an indictment of him, because I think, people talk about William O'Neill being manipulated, and they think his manipulation started when he stole that car and the FBI convinced him to become an FBI informant. But his manipulation really started when he was a baby and he was born into a certain social situation and told to aspire for something that was incredibly difficult to grasp without breaking some rules, and he was told that was the definition of freedom and that was the definition of power. And he was chasing that thing, and so how that put him on a path of individualism, the opposite of in a lot of ways, he is a living and breathing example of, a capitalist mindset.
Yeah.
And so it was just like, okay, let's take a look at these men, yes, but also these archetypes and ways of living, and let's contrast them. And that feels like a political thing we can kind of get behind,
Mm-hmm.
So.
And what was it like to not only receive their blessings, but to be able to consult and work directly with Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. and Aquan Jetty, formerly known as Deborah Johnson?
I mean, it was priceless,
Mm-hmm.
quite frankly. Like, you're talking about people who were there,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have to recognize that Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. he was in the room. He was in his mother's belly that entire
Mm-hmm.
time. And I believe that he experienced that trauma, long before he came into this world. And the reverberations of it, which is a movie and story unto itself, you know. So, and then obviously with the Kula Nigeri, she's as Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. says, he stands on the shoulders of two twin towers, two twin tower
Mm-hmm.
revolutionaries, So it was invaluable having their input. It saved us from making mistakes we would have made.
Yeah.
A lot of mistakes we would have made. Some that might seem small to you and I because we aren't members of that organization and that culture,
Mm-hmm.
but would not have been small whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. I was actually listening to the Sundance Q&A, and Daniel Kaluuya credited you with providing him with the Black Panther reading materials to help him prepare for the role. Were you as intimately familiar with the Black Panther Party prior to your involvement with this film?
Not nearly as intimately.
Mm-hmm.
I had a surface level understanding, to be
Mm-hmm.
honest. I mean,
Same.
I'd seen some documentaries and I knew who Huey Newton was. I knew who Bobby Seale was. I knew who Eldridge Cleaver was. I read Soul on Ice. But I was not nearly as intimately. I didn't know. I'd heard of Fred Hampton my whole life growing up, but I knew more about how he'd been killed than I did anything about what he'd done while alive.
Mm-hmm. And Judas and the Black Messiah takes viewers through a range of emotions just as we're watching it. Was it as tense on the set as it was for those of us that were watching it?
Some days
Mm-hmm.
it was particularly hard for Lakeith.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly heavy for him. I think he had the most difficult task,
Mm-hmm.
embodying this person he, to start with, had a very strong disdain for, and to access him had to tap into just really some traumatic memories, personal memories,
Yeah.
and it was a lot of this I didn't find out until after the fact, but it was incredibly hard for him. I think
Not,
he's still dealing with that stuff.
I can only imagine. I mean, he played the role so well that people are probably going to start kind of coming at him in the streets. It's one of those things, but it's testament to who he is as an actor as well. But, it's very intense.
Yeah.
I think what the movie highlights is nothing is outside the realms of possibility. Even in today's climate, you do see people doing very good work on the ground, but the perception through the media and even politically will be that these peacemakers are terrorists or into violence. What should people take away from this film, and how you were able to highlight the positivity of the Black Panther Party?
Well, just that, there's the stuff that's been put forth about them being, a militant terrorist group is a complete fabrication, and that this is I'm not going to sit here and say this is the real story. This is a glimpse. There's a dramatization of the real story,
Mm-hmm.
but I encourage anyone who sees this film to seek out the real story and the truth. Google Chairman Fred Hampton, look up books about Chairman Fred Hampton, look up books about the Black Panthers and study that history, because there's a lot contained therein that applies to the world we live in today.
Absolutely.
And, so.
And what can we do to preserve Fred Hampton's legacy?
I mean, I know that this movie is going to introduce him to a wider range of people. But I think that's a good thing. I think to really preserve his legacy, seek to move the way he moved. There's his politics, but there's also the way that he moved, which was informed by his politics.
Yeah.
And whether you agree with his politics or not, I don't think that people can deny that this was a man who loved his people and who cared about his community and was trying to improve it. And those are qualities that I think anyone should aspire to. Really.
Yeah, I agree. And what's next for Shaka King?
I got a movie idea I've been toying with, but I need some time
To flesh it
develop
out.
it. So yeah, to develop it. So I'm looking forward to that.
Great, great. Well, thank you for your time. My name is Koku with blackfilm.com. Judas and the Black Messiah is out now on HBO Max, streaming through March 14th, and also in select cinemas. Ladies and gentlemen, Shaka King.
Thank you, Koku.
Thank
Take
you
care.
so much. Take care. Appreciate you.
You too.
Thanks.
Bye.
Neighbor.